Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and welcome to my Catholic review of Doki Doki Literature Club. It sure has been a while since I've done a Catholic review, as a lot of you are probably thinking, but it can be hard to find quality stories nowadays, especially one as good as Doki Doki Literature Club's. At first glance, this doesn't seem like the kind of game that would warrant a Catholic review, as even from a secular perspective, it doesn't really seem to have an overarching message that it's trying to tell, apart from don't get addicted to dating sims, because it's really silly reasoning that people use to get into this genre. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to look through this game from the perspective of a Catholic and talk about what I admire and how I wish people in real life were a little bit closer to, of all the characters I'm going to mention, Monica. I believe that Monica is one of the most real characters I've seen in a video game in a very long time. In fact, when I was practicing this script in my head last night, I was even thinking I might go so far as to say that Monica is a Christ figure of sorts. And then I realized, that's stretching it. I mean, considering what Monica does, that seems like totally the Antichrist thing to do if God is all loving and all powerful and sacrificed himself for everyone, whereas Monica was extremely selfish and ruthless. But on the other hand, if we look at it from the perspective of realism versus subjective logic, then the implications become a lot clearer. But to avoid confusing you guys, let's start from the bottom. And just in case you didn't read my warning at the start, this is going to spoil the entirety of the game. So if you want to go in blind, you might want to stop. So the premise is that you play as one guy, which you get to name, and he joins a literature club that has only girls in it. So he thinks to himself, oh boy, I'm going to be able to woo one of these girls. Now the actual dating simulation part of it is really more of just a light visual novel. You read a lot of dialogue. None of it is voiced. In this game's case, I think it's kind of okay. Normally, I'm the type of guy that advocates for voice acting in just about everything, but in Doki Doki Literature Club, it manages to work. Then you make light decision-making skills, and by light, I mean picking random words and hoping that one of the girls in the group will like the words that you chose. You don't even get to write the poem itself. Then you choose who to show it to, and you get to read the girls' poems, which are way more in-depth than anything you could have written. And then you'll eventually get other light decisions that you get to make. And by light, I mean, who are you going to assist for the festival? Who are you going to show your poem to first? And at the end of the day, spoiler alert, your choices don't really matter. You're gonna get pretty much the same ending no matter what you do. And while it is true that there's like an alternate hidden ending that you can get if you manage to get every single optional scene, the crux of the ending is still basically the same. Because after a while, it turns out that your childhood friend Sayori has been dealing with depression, and eventually she ends up killing herself. Most players would probably think, what did I do wrong? Is it possible that maybe I upset her with some of my decisions, and maybe I should have been paying more attention to the dialogue? But then, when you go back to alter your save file, you find that it's gone. Not only that, but once you finish the scene of the character's inner monologue lamenting what choices he made, the game resets itself, but now it's in a glitched format where you go through the main narrative again, but this time Sayori doesn't exist, as though her suicide literally affected the game's file so that she would not only be gone from that reality, but the second alternate timeline she's been, quote, killed in. And the game is glitching like crazy. The music goes on and off, jump scares are abundant. There's some creepy imagery, but most of it is just unsettling stuff, like Monica appearing in front of the dialogue box, or the screen turning to static, stuff like that. And then eventually one of the girls commits suicide there, and then Monica finally realizes, shoot, I've been meddling too much. And so Monica deletes the files of the other two girls and then resets the game again, but this time it's only you, yes, you, not the player, you, and Monica sitting across from each other in a classroom, and Monica tells you that she's actually a sentient being that is aware that she's in a dating simulator, and that the creator deliberately programmed her so that there wouldn't be a Monica route. So, in order to get her way, Monica hacked the files of the game characters to amplify they're already undesirable trademarks. So Yuri has a tendency to want to sort of be possessive, but then Monica amplifies it so that she's really possessive. Natsuki is the grumpy sourpuss, then Monica amplifies her anger. You get the picture. Basically, Monica wanted to make it so that you wouldn't like the other girls, so that you would like her instead. But Monica eventually realized that her tampering caused the game to be broken, so you could hardly even play it. So she decided, well, what if I just get rid of their character files altogether? And so that leads to just Monica. Now the irony here is that the background music and the background itself and Monica's very creepy expression, in which she never blinks or moves a muscle during the sequence, would make you think that this is supposed to be an unsettling scene. You're supposed to hate Monica's guts. You're supposed to be like, Monica killed her own friends, she manipulated your character's emotions, she knows that you're not even your character anymore, and in the case of the Switch version that I play, she'll actually call you out by your profile name. It's actually the best scene in the game because Monica's dialogue doesn't feel cliched. It feels like a real person could be speaking. I mean, there are times here and there where she'll mention the fact that she's in a game, or she'll say, maybe my programming is off. But the advice that Monica gives is so profound and so thought-provoking. And canonically, she's supposedly 18 years old. Man, when I was 18, I didn't have wisdom like that. So it makes you desire to get to know her more. And as it turns out, you can have approximately an hour and a half's worth of monologues from Monica during this scene where she gives you increasingly powerful insights into how the world works. Unfortunately, the game soft locks you into continuing this route indefinitely. You can't even reset the game and try another path. If you try to save or load your file, Monica will just say, I'm not going anywhere. So the only way that you can break out of this deadlock and proceed to the actual credits is to go into the virtual machine, at least that's the case in the Switch version that I played, and you have to delete Monica's character file. So you essentially give her a taste of her own medicine. At first, Monica's of course really offended. She's like, did you delete me? What the heck are you doing? I sacrificed everything for you. But then she realizes that she's being a bit of a hypocrite, as she also killed off the other characters, admittedly indirectly, but she was the one that tampered with their files. And so she decides, you know what, I'm just going to let the game start over and you can play without me. So then the game starts up again, but this time Monica is out of the picture. But now that Sayori is the vice president, now she's become sentient, and not only that, but even more powerfully than Monica, she is able to realize the actions you took in the other timelines, and then realize, now I really love you. But then the remnant of Monica's file that you didn't manage to delete deletes the game, and then it proceeds to the credits. So, what's the point of all of this from a Catholic perspective? Well, I believe that what the game is trying to say is stop fawning over fantasy, basically. Now, you could make the argument that Monica herself is fantasy. But Monica acknowledges that. She's aware that she's a fake girl within a fake game. She knows that she's a program that is designed to fall in love with you. But she also realizes that the other girls are mindless machines that have also been programmed. The difference between them and her is that they don't know that they're in a dating sim and are just following their protocol. So she says, why are you getting so worked up about these characters that are not only fake, but the designer deliberately altered or structured their archetypes so that they would be based on Japanese cliches. Natsuki is obviously the tsundere type, where she comes across as really mean and cold-hearted, but she's secretly a sweetheart. And then Yuri is the quiet, bookish type. Sayori is the one that's really energetic and bubbly, but she's got a secret buried deep down. And it just kind of makes most people who don't like anime groan. It's just like, not these guys again. But yet, the funny thing is, there are people out there, and I presume some people watching this video even, that like these kinds of characters and get attached to them in the same way as they would get attached to a real girl. There are people out there, and I could probably find countless links if I really wanted to, of people that become so obsessed with their dating simulators that they will actually marry the girl in the virtual world as opposed to, I don't know, actually getting a real girlfriend. And it's kind of a sickening thought because objectification of women is one of the most forbidden sins in all of the Bible. We are taught that both men and women are humans, and humans have the highest level of intelligence of anything that God created. Well, except for the angels, but for the sake of coherence, let's just say all that God created that walked on the earth. Humans are the most intelligent creatures ever created. But to turn a woman into an object is essentially to reduce her role to that of either an animal or an idol. And idolatry is also one of the most forbidden practices in the Bible. Well, it is true that if you fall in love with Monica in the game, you're essentially also committing idolatry. You're not supposed to take Monica as an actual person. You're supposed to take her as, this is an example of how someone isn't an archetype that actually has depth to them. Now, admittedly, throughout this whole scene, you're not actually able to talk to Monica directly, but there are ways that she can tell what you're doing, which in a sense is sort of like an indirect conversation. If you try to fast forward her dialogue, she'll be like, I'm not going anywhere, don't you want to listen? Every time you turn the game off, she'll make a remark about how like, oh, that was so painful going through the startup screen and all the lights and sounds, please don't try to do that. And if you're streaming the game, she'll even say hi to everyone in the chat and say, can you let the recorder know that it's not polite to film people without their knowledge? And then she does a jump scare just to further prove the point and embarrass the streamer. So essentially, Monica, even despite the fact that she's fake, is exhibiting real traits of what a realistic woman would probably do if she was put into a position where she was objectified in this manner. Now, what's the solution, you might ask? Well, for one, if you want someone to like you, manipulating them into liking you is more or less slavery. You have to be willing to give people free will, and the girls in this game do not have free will. That is something that they're conspicuously lacking because they're meant to trudge along on their pre-programmed path of, we are just going to obsess over this male avatar that you can't even see, except in one scene, but even then you only get to see the back of his head. And it essentially makes them characters. Now, admittedly, you could learn to like them, and I think the DDLC Plus version definitely makes a case where they're a lot more complex and nuanced, but at the end of the day, they're still only characters. We as humans have the right to interact with one another. We have the ability to make our own decisions. We have the ability to love in the same way that we love them, whereas in a dating sim, we're the ones with the intelligence, but the girls in the simulation are the ones that have to follow their pre-programmed path. So essentially, you're falling in love with a machine rather than a real person, and that's just sickening. It's almost like it's an insult to actual girls because they try so hard to be their authentic, genuine, God-given selves, and yet they're still downplayed in favor of these character types that could probably be typed up in seconds in an anime character generator. And not only that, but a lot of these stereotypes are so tried and true that you could say that there's no true character development or overarching nuance that makes them a specific person, like real people are. So, at the end of the day, Doki Doki Literature Club is trying to say, stop and think the next time you try to equate video games with real life. The next time you're playing chess and you, I don't know, defeat the pawn, and you think, it's just a game, I'm not really killing anyone. But then when you go to kill someone in real life, I certainly hope you don't. But people will be totally okay with seeing people's heads chopped off in a movie, but then if it happens in real life, it's suddenly gross. Maybe stop and think about how to separate reality from fiction. And realize that maybe we do get too attached to these characters. Maybe we do get too scared of fiction. And maybe we need to be able to differentiate it. The next time we play a dating sim, do it for the fun of it. but don't do it as a replacement of actual people. Don't do something artificial to get pleasure that could be attained just from simply being a human being and exerting our abilities of free will and rational thought. I hope I've been able to make sense in all of this video. This is the kind of thing where a lot of people simply aren't going to want to listen to me no matter what, because there are people in this world that are just too empathetic, and when they read a story, they're not really capable of separating themselves from that story. And I used to be one of those people when I was in depression. I used to be that type that would cry if one of my favorite characters would die. When I first started playing video games with violence in it, it was initially very hard to stomach a character dying, until I realized, no, I am going to save my tears and my emotions for real people. These are gaming characters that are not capable of making choices of their own. And as a result, since getting out of that mindset, I've been able to make a lot of genuine, real friends. And a lot of times, if I try to compartmentalize those friends in the same way as video game characters, I find myself in a bad place, because then I realize, oh shoot, this person has more complexity than just a simple 4-letter combination, if you want to use Myers-Briggs as an example. Instead, I need to look at the individualism of the character and realize this wasn't, well, yes, God created the people, but God also gave the people the ability to choose. And that's what makes us beautiful as humans, because we have the right to reject our creator. But on the same token, we also have the ability to love our creator almost as much as he loves us. I don't know if we'll ever completely equate ourselves with God's love, but we at least have the ability to try, which is better than what the animals have to do. So, at the end of the day, the point of Doki Doki Literature Club is to wake up, live life, and don't base all of your decisions and pleasure making off of a game. At the end of the day, it's a scripted sequence of events that's only going to give you so much pleasure. Eventually, you have to wake up, get back to reality, and stop trying to hide from it. So with that, thank you very much for watching. If I am in any way unclear during this video, please let me know in the comment section. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and I am really thankful for my actual friends that are real flesh and blood people that can reciprocate any love that I'm giving them. Bye!